Okay, I'm ready when you are.
Awesome. Then I will start. Here we go. Rhyme or free, it doesn't matter to me. It's my bad poetry. Good day, and welcome to My Bad Poetry, a podcast where we take a deep dive into our poems from youth, yesteryear, or even yesterday. Always asking the question, why in the world did I write this? I'm Aaron.
And I'm Dave.
And today we are interviewing the author of 24 poems. And if you think that's not many, well, you are in for a surprise because John Yamrus has over 35 books published, 29 of them collections of poetry. 24 poems, his most recent, as well as selected poems, the director's cut. But today, we hope to hear some that maybe should have never made the cut. John Yamrus, welcome to My Bad Poetry.
Thank you for having me, and I'm surprised you haven't had me on sooner. I've written so many bad poems over the course of my career.
Oh man, yeah. Well, we are always glad to have people willing to come back on. So if you say you have a lot, we'll bring you back.
Oh yeah.
So is there anything in that introduction that I missed that you might want to lift up to our listeners?
Well, I don't know. Over the course of my 53 years as a working writer, I've managed to publish more than 3,000 poems, which gives a high probability that there's going to be some real stinkers in that number. So I hope we've chosen three interesting pieces that will be low enough to get under your standards here.
We will be the judge of that shortly.
I think we can do this.
Yeah. Well, if you're ready to dive in, I'm going to throw it over to Dave. What have you written for us this week?
This is a poem called A Fool. Anyone can see ridiculousness. All that I can find is geekdom, really down to earth in kindness, or just too kind for his own good. Nothing if not a great friend. I had to work really hard to make it an acrostic so I could call Aaron a fool. That's all I got for this week.
I was waiting for the punchline. This is good.
I noticed your emphasis on the beginning of the lines, and I put it together there at the end. But how did you get the first two A's? Anyone and
all.
All. Oh, okay.
I was debating if I could count a fool in the acrostic.
Oh.
No. But I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't title my poem the first line of my poem, Aaron. That's a fight that he and I have pretty often.
Quite a bit. Well, John, have you ever done acrostics in your over 3,000 poems? Is that something you've ever tackled?
I've never done acrostics. I've done calisthenics, and I've done pizza and spaghetti, but never acrostics.
I'll take that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So Dave and I were both, we really did stumble into this. And it sounds to me like you also kind of, what did you say? You lied your way into writing? You've been doing this for so long. How did you get into this?
Well, I've told this story more times than I can count, but I can't count very high, but I have told this story a lot. Now, I've been publishing for 53 years, as I might have said, but like any aspiring writer, when I first started out, I couldn't get any doors to open. And I had a good friend, Rick. We were both aspiring writers. We were 19, 20, something like that at the time. And we were really big about how we couldn't get anyone to open a door for us because everyone was saying, where have you been published? What awards have you won? And the answer was always nowhere and nothing. So one night, had to be about 2:00 in the morning after I was walking Rick home, and we had just finished a bottle of Pop-Off vodka. I don't know if they still sell Pop-Off vodka, but at the time it probably sold for about $4 for a bottle. Had a little Mexican sombrero on the top of it. Anyway, it was about 2:00 in the morning, and we were stumbling back towards his house, complaining about not being able to get published or not winning any awards. And we were standing at the corner, and this is a true story. We're standing at the corner of Oliver and Wakefield Streets. And Rick looks up at the sign. He looks at the Wakefield sign, hands me the bottle of Pop-Off vodka, and says, "Here, I hereby award you the Wakefield Prize." I took the bottle of vodka, went home. The next morning, I swear to God this is true. The next morning, I wrote to a very prestigious poetry magazine out of Chicago at the time, and said, "I have recently been awarded the prestigious Wakefield Prize. Would you guys be interested in some of my work?" I sent off to them, and I went on with my life. And a few weeks later, I got a letter from the publisher, the editor. He said, "I heard about you recently winning the Wakefield Prize. I'd very much like to publish your work." And that's the true story of how I got my foot in the door as a working writer.
That's amazing.
That's incredible. Wow.
But it just goes to show, like, just how complicated all of those things can be, where there's just so many prizes to keep track of anyway.
Yeah.
And truth be told, that's the only award I've ever won in 53 years.
Well, it's a prized possession there.
Yeah.
Well, I am a two-time winner. A few years ago, a buddy of mine sent me another bottle of Pop-Off vodka and congratulated me on winning a second time.
Wow.
So I'm a two-time winner of the prestigious Wakefield Prize.
Wow.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
We were in the presence of such a...
Of
an
greatness.
accomplishment.
I could see why you guys wanted to have me on the show.
Oh, yeah.
Well, that's incredible. So the first poem that you provided for us is dated 1975. Is this some of your earliest work?
Well, my first book came out in 1970.
Okay. So we're 5 years
20
in.
years old, and I think they were published on stone tablets a while back. But the one that I picked, I wanted to give an example of my early work, so I picked something from 1975. As most aspiring writers, as most young writers, you emulate the people that you like. And I went through the usual period where I went through my Walt Whitman period, I went through my Beats period, the whole Jack Kerouac, Lawrence Ferlinghetti, Allen Ginsberg period. And this is a poem from my third book. And I'll read you parts of it or read the whole thing, whatever you want to suffer through.
Oh, read the whole thing. We got to hear it all.
This is from my third book, and you'll notice the tip of the hat to Jack Kerouac. The poem is simply titled Poem. Now, let me back up. My poems, even from the beginning, I was never big on titles. The one thing that I was smart about was that I realized right from the beginning that the reader is pretty smart and they don't need to have something spelled out for them. They don't need to have a title that tells them what the whole thing is about. So my poems pretty much just start. And this poem is called Poem.
Great.
Walked home, head down, hands in pockets, sad dream boy of the world, looking stern-eyed for those four who chased me, trying to look tough. I sneezed and plunked in a puddle, sloshed home, ankle wet, dreaming dreams of crime and misery, meditating on my sins, not remembering them, smiling at those I do remember. Walked home still looking for that four, knowing they are my angels of black judgment. I cannot fight something that does not exist. This poop madhouse can't go on forever. Heal yourself. That is me in my self-righteous, pretentious Jack Kerouac mode.
Nice.
I love sometimes we encounter poems that Dave and I call sad boy poems. It's like, the why me? And you literally provide us with sad dream boy as in the third line there. So this is not just a sad boy poem. This is a sad dream boy poem.
Well, if you're going to go for it, you might as well be all in.
Oh, yeah, go big.
Right.
Well,
Yeah.
even from the beginning, I was all in. Now, when I got this invitation from you guys to be on the show, knowing I had to come up with some real stinkers, I found it, I won't say difficult because I've written a lot of bad poetry, but I don't keep a lot of things in progress. I don't have, a box full of works in progress.
Sure.
I don't have notebooks from 45 years ago with sketches and little bits and lines and pieces of poems. So unfortunately, for all of us, unfortunately, I had to pick things from my early books. And there was a time in my career. Now, like you said, I've published 35 books, and there was a time in my career when I felt like I said everything. It's neat because there was my beginning career, my first 14, 15 books or so, where I was writing, getting published, but writing crap. I didn't feel right about what was coming out, although I was having success as a writer. And many people will say, with 15 books under your belt at that point, you were quite successful. And I guess I was, but I didn't like what I was doing. So at that point, I stopped. I gave up writing for literally 10 years.
Wow.
I didn't sketch anything. I didn't draft anything, nothing. And then one day it was like the clouds opened up and I kind of figured it out. And in that second part of my career, the last 20, 25 books have been me speaking in a voice that is truly mine. And what we're looking at now is the old voice. So I didn't mean to take over the conversation here, but I wanted to make that point.
Oh, it's great context. Yeah.
That's fascinating. So were those 10 years what allowed you to use your real voice, or was it just what brought that
It was
on?
a whole combination of things. Being of a certain age, I'm 72. I'd been publishing for a long time. It was my early years were spent in the heyday of what was then called the Mimeo Revolution, the time when people like Bukowski and Ginsberg and all those guys, Gerald Laughlin, were getting their start, and anybody who had a cheap $200 Mimeo machine was starting a magazine. And as time went on, those magazines kind of dried up and went away. And at that point, that's when I decided I'd have enough, and I gave it up for 10 years until I got the bug again.
Ah.
Nice.
So this is what you're categorizing as the Kerouac phase. What in this particular poem just rubbed you the wrong way?
Several things.
Okay.
Many things. It was the thinking that poetry as such, the definition of poetry is saying as many things as you can with as few words as possible. And the tendency for dumb, aspiring, young, new writers is to leave words out. So,
Hmm.
so walking home, head down, hands in pockets, and sad dream boy of the world. It's like talking in shorthand. And
Hmm.
and it made sense at the time. It felt like, oh man, here's a poet here. But looking back in hindsight, it's embarrassing. And it kind of taught me to be myself, to be freer. And that shorthand of leaving words out was just a dumb, dated idea. But the good thing is it brought me to myself where I am now.
Yeah. So what you don't like about it is it feels very inauthentic.
Exactly. Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, fascinating.
I can understand that. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like as a writer, you're putting on various masks. And as a young writer, of course, you have to wear those masks. I wore my Ginsberg mask. I wore my good gray poet, my Walt Whitman mask. And we all do that. And now people think that all you have to do is wear that mask and you are a poet. You are a writer. You are what you claim to be. You have to get behind the mask and be real.
I feel like that. Yeah, I feel like to bring it to Aaron's poetry, a lot of his is like middle school and high school.
High school poetry. Yep.
No, terrible.
Yeah.
But like, I feel like that's a really common thing that you see from especially students trying to write, is that I don't want to present myself because I'm too afraid to be myself. And also, I don't think I have a worthwhile thing to say, so I'll pretend to be one of these great poets,
Exactly.
and I'll get there somewhere.
Yeah.
Exactly. You tend to give the audience or the public what you think they want, rather than what you are. Let me give an example. The second of the three
Yeah. Go for
papers
it.
that we picked, the second of them, it was quite successful back in its day. It was even put out as a poster. Didn't sell for shit, but it was put out as a poster. And I really liked it at the time, but looking back, you kind of cringed. I'm going to read it now, and you guys could suffer through it with me. It's not too long. In this just a human time of morning, noon, and night, I can't recall my innocence. I can't remember seeing signs marked good and evil, or feeling something gentle passing from my view, or hearing angels stepping forward into dark. I only know this sweet, sad, and tender moment, here then gone. Now, you'll when I think of it, when I look back at that, I thought, man, how pretentious. And then somebody went and made a poster of it, which was very kind of them, but it didn't age well.
Sure. It is kind of funny how it feels poetic.
Exactly. But if you start taking it apart and looking at it, you're like, what the heck is this guy saying?
Yeah.
And
Right.
the good thing of that in hindsight is that it plunked me over the head with the reality that you better think about what you're saying when you say it.
No.
Exactly. I can't even find the words because it's right there. It's the poetic vignettes. You see that, and they're split up just like with the two little
Two line stanzas
Yeah.
that seem to look very nice on paper. And if you take it apart piece by piece, it had everything it needed to get polite applause at your monthly poetry club. And
right.
everybody will nod their head and clap and think they can do better. And
This does feel like a poem written with a checklist in hand.
exactly.
Like I need, okay, so we're talking about time, so we need morning, noon, night. We're talking about how that works, so we need like good and evil. We need angels. We need like the view of time passing. Okay, check, 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 check.
Touched all the bases.
Yep, poem.
Nailed
Exactly.
it.
So you can see why I gave up writing for 10 years.
That is such an impressive thing to be able to do, to recognize, like, even in the midst of success, to say, this isn't what I want to be saying, this isn't authentically me, or this isn't life-giving. Aaron and I talk a lot about kind of the toxicness of being a man and being right all of the time, or thinking that you actually know better than other people without having the experience to know. So that, I would say that that's a really impressive thing to say. This isn't right or good, even if other people think it's right and or good.
At that point in my life, in my time, again, like I said, I had 12, 15 books out, and I had a bit of a reputation in some sections. But yeah, I felt good to be able to walk away from it for a period of time, and it turned out to be exactly 10 years.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So one thing that I think has been fairly consistent throughout your work, even with these old ones that you are giving to us as examples of bad poetry, you continue to not capitalize much of anything.
Well, okay, there's a story with that one too.
Okay, let's hear it.
There seems to be a story with everything that I do. I had, early in my career, I had a novel, my first novel. Now, I've published 2 novels over the years. And the only thing those 2 novels have taught me is that I'm not a novelist. They taught me that I'm more of a sprinter than a long distance runner.
Sure.
And when I finished this first novel, of course, I wrote it like Jack Kerouac. I wrote it on a teletype roll. I went the whole 9 yards and wrote it on a roll of paper. I then transcribed it to individual 8.5 by 11 sheets. But I found through my years as a typer, I'm a 2-finger writer, 2-finger typer. And I found that I could type faster if I don't hit that shift, that capital thing. So I could type faster. So I typed up this, I forget how many pages the novel was, and I sent it off to my prospective publisher at that time. And for some reason, he liked it that way, and he published the entire novel in lowercase. And to show you the climate of the times, when the book was published, one of the very few reviews talked about how the author, me, highlighted the diminishing role of the individual in society by my eliminating the capital personal pronoun I. When all it was I was being lazy and stupid and sent it off to the publisher that way. So you build a reputation that way. In any event, that 2-finger typing just stuck with me. And the typing has nothing to do with E.E. Cummings or anything like that.
Sure.
It's because I was lazy and only had 2 fingers that worked.
So it's all about the speed.
Yeah,
Again, that sprint. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
I love that so much, because I was a really annoying teenager when I had to read things or like look at art, and I would just, oh, this is a piece about humankind's inhuman kindness to humankind itself. Because I was just trying to be edgy and trying to be interesting and make fun of people who would make those statements about art. And I realized eventually along the way, no, sometimes people are just making beautiful things without subtext behind it, and it's just the beauty of that. Sometimes there's more meaning to it, and sometimes you apply your own meaning to it.
To carry that thought even further, the answer is yes. Most of the times when I write something, like I don't sit down to write like I want to start at point A and end at point B and make this point.
Right.
Anytime I want to sit down with a destination or an idea in mind, crap turns out. I've always loved Miles Davis. I've always loved jazz. And behind jazz is the freedom to let the conversation go where it will go. And that's what I've learned to do with my poetry, is let it take me on the ride, and it's so much more exciting.
Huh.
Nice. So that would lead into, again, why this second poem just rubs you the wrong way, in that it's almost too structured.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And well, structure was, I was never big on structure. I've always, in my poetry, love poems were always a big part of my repertoire.
Sure.
I always tell this story that people say, "Why'd you get into writing?" or "How'd you get into writing?" And I always say that, being 5'6", was too short for the basketball team and too skinny for the football team and just too untalented for the baseball team. So I got into writing. It was a way to meet girls. So love poems are the natural extension. Okay, and let me read the third of these.
Yes, please.
Okay.
And this one, again, there's no title. The first line becomes the title, and I'll just read it.
Yes.
I have your legs memorized like a grasshopper has a blade of grass. I know that when we lie in bed rubbing our legs together, we sound like happy crickets. But GK says I'm not arrogant enough for her. Maybe I'm not. She doesn't know me. She doesn't know this is the life I choose to have. She doesn't know I'm settling down, tethering the horse, disembarking. She doesn't know I've already passed those signs that read, "Caution, wide road ahead." She doesn't know I know your legs like a grasshopper knows a blade of grass. Now, that poem kind of works. It's not bad. It has all of the elements there that I later used to hopefully better effect in my writing. It starts with a point that I have your legs memorized like a grasshopper, and it turns the poem on its head towards the end, but uses the same phrases. In the middle, it just kind of falls apart, but it was a start.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I do love the chiastic structure with the beginning and the end of the grasshopper and the blade of grass. Now, am I interpreting this right, in that you are talking about two different women in this poem?
Sure. Oh, you hit that nail right on the head. No.
No.
Nah. Yeah, well, to a certain extent. In the poem, it says, GK says I'm not arrogant enough for her. That goes back to, she was a close friend of Charles Bukowski. And she had told me that I was talented, but I wasn't crazy. I wasn't mad. She said, "You'll be a good writer, but you're not mad like Bukowski." And I had to come to terms with that. So, in this poem, I was saying that GK says I'm not arrogant enough for her. So I just had to throw in that little connection to Bukowski.
Oh, funny. So, but at the end here, it says she doesn't know I know your legs. So it sounds as if it's two different individuals at that point.
That's a writer not thinking things totally.
Fair enough.
Gotcha. Oh, I was seeing scandal all over this. It's like you're cuddling in the bed with one person, but you're like, she doesn't know I know your legs. Other unnamed person. So funny.
I'm sitting here looking at your face, and you're trying to make sense of that poem, and I can see you looking at it. Please don't. And that's another thing. People try to look. This is unfair. I'll say people try to look too deeply into poems, but that's stupid. You should look deeply into them, but you should also just enjoy them from what they are on the surface.
Sure.
That's one thing I've learned over the years, is to try to make the poems work on two levels. Hopefully that's a skill that I've learned over the years. And getting back to where we talked about how I don't save works in progress. I found that if the thing doesn't come out fairly complete the first time, when I go back and tinker at it and hammer at it and bang away at it, it looks like something with a whole lot of Band-Aids on it. And so the thing that these early years, these poems that kind of have nice starts, what they taught me was that I had to trust myself. And at 72, I finally trust myself.
I love that.
So then you don't do a lot of editing after, just because then that's going to be that Band-Aid covered poem.
That's like, somebody asked me that same kind of question the other day, and that's like, it's muscle memory. I've been doing it for so long. I know what I'm doing. It's like a baseball player. Somebody hits a ground ball to your right. You don't think I have to pivot this way and move this leg. Right. It comes naturally. Like a jazz musician, you don't think if I do this series of notes, I'm going to get this same response from my listener, but that just happens organically. And something like that knowledge, that understanding only happens over time. You don't get that right out of the gate.
So at this point, you said these are from like your third to fifth published books.
Yes.
Were you heavily editing at this point in your career?
I wouldn't say heavily, but back then I had stacks of works in progress.
Sure. Okay.
And now, again, I swear to God, if I looked on my computer at I have a file that said poems in progress, and there's less than one page on that, purposely, because I want to be able to come down here and say, I'm writing, and I write, and I get the job done. And I wanted to be the kind of writer who carries his lunchbox to work every day. I wanted to be somebody who does the job and takes the job seriously. I don't take myself seriously, but I take my job as a writer seriously. I was doing a reading a couple of years ago, and after the reading, this guy, he had the whole poet look. He had the flannel shirt, the chambray, and all that kind of stuff. And I asked him, what are you working on now? What are you doing? And he went, no, well, I'm not writing anything right now, but I am thinking of writing. And what do you say to that? So I had no answer other than wanting to punch him in the face.
No.
You don't think about writing. You sit down and you do it, and you do it every day. That's the one when aspiring writers ask me for a tip, I always say, sit down every day and write something. Do something to advance your writing every single day. Most days it's going to be crap and you're going to throw it out, but do something every day. You have to develop those good habits. Waiting for inspiration is for rookies and amateurs. Inspiration will come, but you got to do the work every day.
I like that.
I do like that a lot.
That feels really honest, and it also feels like something I can't do, which is probably why I'm not a poet.
But I love that that it's not. I mean, every time, and sorry, I'm all over the place today. Every time there's like this idea of like a savant or a genius or something, there's always those, what do they say, 10,000 hours or something behind the scenes. And no one is a phenom out the gate.
Exactly. Jack Kerouac once said, walking on water wasn't built in a day. And what he meant by that was just exactly what you're saying, that it comes from hours and hours and hours of practice.
Yeah.
And you get those people who say, I want to be a writer. I've sent things out to 20 magazines and I've been rejected by them all. What I tell aspiring writers is that those obstacles are put in your way to weed out the unwilling. And I always say you have to be willing.
Yeah, it's work.
Nice.
Ah, that's lovely. Now, you said you were never one for titles. I noticed that you have a book from 1977 called Poems. Mm-hmm. so that's what it is.
I have another one called 15 Poems, and the new one is called 24 Poems.
Exactly, that's what I was going to say. So you have your two most recent are Selected Poems, the Director's Cut, right? And then 24 Poems is your most recent book.
Also, I've gone the other route. I had one book called Doing Cartwheels on Doomsday Afternoon, which I thought was kind of a cool title.
That is a fun title.
Yeah. And you mentioned Selected Poems, the Director's Cut. Why that's called the Director's Cut, it's a 542-page monster of a book. It's huge. And why it's called the Director's Cut is that originally the publisher wanted to bring out a 550-page best of thing. And I told him he was nuts. I said, nobody's going to want to pay the price to buy 550 pages of my stuff. we fought for 2 months over it. And I finally got him to cut the book down to 380 some pages.
Okay.
The book got published, and it actually became his best-selling title ever. So then the guy comes back to me and said, John, the book did so well, we should restore it and do it with the 550 pages. I said, you're even crazier than I thought you were. Because we already sold as many as we were going to sell. You're going to lose your shirt publishing a 550-page book, expecting more people to buy it. We fought. He ended up publishing a 542-page book called Selected Poems, the Director's Cut. And to both of our surprise, it actually very briefly hit #1 on Amazon in poetry. I took a screenshot photograph of that just so I could remember the moment. But we were both surprised that the book sold very well.
That's amazing.
Nice.
Yeah.
So you never know.
You never know. Well, this has been a blast. And I think you've brought us 3 amazing works of bad poetry. And so thank you for that. But here at My Bad Poetry, we end each week with the words of a true poet. So, John, would you be willing to read for us another one of your poems, this time one that you're proud of?
Okay, I'm going to double down on that if I
Okay.
can. I'm
Yes.
going to read two very brief poems that I'm proud of,
Perfect.
Beautiful.
and I'll end with those. The first one, dogs are big in my life, and the first one is about a dog. It goes, in dog obedience class, for once my little Abby did everything right. For once she didn't bite, jump, or pull. This time she paid attention and sat and stayed and came and listened, just like all the other dogs. I can't tell you how much I hated that. And
I love it.
the final thing that I'll leave you with today is even shorter. Goes like this. If you want your poems to be real, live them. Don't write them.
That is good advice.
Yeah. That's great. Well, John, this has been a blast, and thank you so much for coming on the show. It sounds like you have plenty of material for future guest appearances. If you would be willing to share your time with us.
I'd love to be back again. I've got a new book coming out in November when it comes out. If you want to do this again, I got plenty of bad poems I could share with you guys.
There we go.
And the current book, like we said, is 24 poems. And, I hope people will pick it up and find at least one of the 24 that they think is good.
Yeah. Now, are those two from the most recent book?
No, they were from selected poems, the director's cut.
Nice.
And with only 24 in the most recent one, if I read one or two, that'd be giving most of the book away.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
No, very good point. This has been My Bad Poetry.
Now, go and write some of your own bad poetry. Going on a show called My Bad Poetry had me, I have to tell you, scared at first. And realizing that I was going to be double teamed about my bad poetry, I was doubly scared, but you guys are real gentlemen, very interesting, and I had a blast.
Rhyme free doesn't matter to me.